Local governments of all sizes faced almost daily cyber threats in Ontario, and that's without the IT budgets of senior levels of government and the staffing needed for 24/7 vigilance. What's at stake and what are municipalities doing to ward off cyber crime? Let's ask. In the home of North America's most famous Shakespeare Festival. There's Dan Matheson. He's the mayor of Stratford, Ontario. In Hamilton, Ontario, Zachary Spicer, associate professor in the School of Public Policy and Administration at York University. In the Queen West area of Ontario's capital city, Sumit Bhatia, director of innovation and policy at the Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst. And in the downtown core, Judy Dizelle, director of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's Enterprise Centre. TVO, incidentally, has an ongoing partnership with AMO. For the last many years, we've had a featured role at your annual general meetings, which, Judy, we look forward to this August, hopefully in person. Can you tell us, is it going to be in person?
It is going to be in person this year, Steve.
Hear, hear. Okay. Hoping we can raise a glass of tea or something together. Let's take a look at some of the notable cyber attacks across the province over the past few years, because some of this stuff happens sort of under the wire and we don't necessarily hear that much about it. But in April of 2018, the town of Wasaga Beach got hit. September the same year, the town of Midland. In 2019, Mayor Matheson's own Stratford got hit. And in January of 21, the entire region of Durham was hit by a cyber attack. Sumit, start us off here. How common are these cyber attacks?
More common than we'd like to see, Steve. There's cyber attacks happening on Canadian municipalities every single day, and there's thousands of attacks that we're facing. And the number keeps going up, especially in light of all of the things that we're seeing happen on a geopolitical level globally, as well as a result of the pandemic.
Zachary, how do they actually happen?
Well, it can be as simple as a staff member clicking a malicious link. Hackers gain access to a network and they hold it for ransom. Typically, these are ransoms of between $50,000 and $100,000, and they are sort of held until a municipality pays.
Now, Judy, surely everybody who works for a municipality is told at some time, don't click on a link that you don't recognize where it's coming from. Yes?
Absolutely, Steve. That is the training that is given to municipal staff. But the reality is that these criminals are getting very, very crafty in terms of their approaches to getting access to networks. And the weakest link is actually the human connection within the systems. Municipalities have done some work in terms of their IT infrastructures to harden them. But it is the human piece. We want to do good service to citizens within municipalities, and sometimes that results in accidentally clicking on a link and giving access to the network that you didn't intend to do.
Your Worship, as we heard, you were on that list we put up just a moment ago. Can you tell us about the experience that Stratford went through?
Well, it was Easter weekend 2019, coming into Easter Sunday morning, and of course our external security company noticed some activity on our servers about 5 a.m., quickly realized that they had gained control over some of the servers, notified our staff, and they, of course, came in on a long holiday weekend to make sure they shut down the system to try to stop them from gaining widespread access to all of our systems. And then the methodical, long, and deliberate process of understanding where they got in and how they got in and how to re-secure the network started to take place. But at the same time, we still had to worry about ongoing operations, ensuring our emergency management services were up, our water and wastewater facilities could still run. And then what do you do with the employees who are going to come to work on Monday, who are used to having technology as the backbone to how they provide service and not being able to access it?
Well, let me do a bunch of follow-ups here. Did you ever get to the bottom of how they got in?
Yes, it was through an appliance, a third-party software that rides in the city system that we use for certain aspects of our operations. It had been in our system for some time, and they had chosen at the deliberate and right time that they wanted to activate it and to take control over the system. And it's one of those things where you look and you wonder how many other vulnerabilities, because you have so much software that rides in your system, are out there, and then also how many other communities is that same software sitting on the servers of and are just waiting to do the exact same thing again.
And how long did it take to fix it?
Well, we were without our computer servers for almost 12 days, which was lightning fast in this business. We had a really good partner in Deloitte and our cybersecurity cyber security, but also our insurer and our own IT staff. But it was tough for 12 days, of course, working through the process, taking servers offline, scrubbing them, checking all devices, hardware, and then bringing them back online. And today, we have a very robust education campaign for our employees with regard to phishing and penetration tests.
Do you know what the cyber criminals actually wanted to do to Stratford?
They just wanted money, Steve. All they really wanted was a Bitcoin ransom, which of course the city paid. And we were caught in a situation. Once you have cyber insurance, your insurance company takes over some of the decisions for you. And they were insistent that based on the amount of money that it would cost to pay the ransomware, that it was far better to do that and than it was to just let them keep it and, of course, rebuild databases. That was against the advice, of course, of the Ontario Provincial Police Cyber Crime Unit, the RCMP crime unit. They don't like you to pay. They'd like you to kind of leave them out on the ledge. There's also the obligation municipalities have, and of course elected councils and administration, of what information do they have access to, and what's our fiduciary duty and legislative responsibility to ensure that it's protected.
Well, let me get where everybody else is on that issue of whether to pay or not to pay. Submit, what's your advice on that?
I think that debate continues in the industry, and I think we're probably going to see, at least in the short term, Steve, a case-by-case evaluation of whether to pay or not to pay. There are organizations that have the luxury and the resources, and I'd say also the influence, to be able to take a stand and say, we will not pay. But we know that there's a lot of small, medium businesses, there are a lot of smaller municipalities that are affected, where getting back to the order of operations is a priority. And in those cases, we do have to evaluate whether or not payment would be the quickest, easiest way for them to get back to running operations. So at this point, I think the debate's going to continue for a while.
Zachary, what's your view on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to recognize as well that paying doesn't guarantee that you're going to get your systems back. In some cases, we have seen municipalities pay, and then they're asked to pay more, $10,000 more, $20,000 more, additional Bitcoin, and then of course it encourages others. So I think municipalities are in a very tricky position because there's no guarantee that you'll get your systems back, but at the same time, that's usually the quickest way to get your systems back. Municipalities are also under tremendous pressure to get back to normal operations, right? And of course, once the public finds out, people are going to be obviously anxious about the potential vulnerability of the information that they've given the government.
Judy, do you have uniform advice that you give to all of Ontario's 444 municipalities on this front?
So in 2020, we did release a cybersecurity toolkit for municipalities, and it reflects exactly what the mayor said in terms of the OPP advice and not paying for ransom. There is an incentive, obviously, to criminals by paying that ransom to continue these kinds of attacks. And it also doesn't guarantee, as mentioned, your data getting back to you. Having said that, the city of Atlanta was attacked in 2018, and they chose not to pay the $55,000 in Bitcoin that was asked in the ransom, and instead decided to rebuild their systems. The last time I checked, they were in about $17 million in terms of rebuilding their system after that ransomware attack. Each municipality has to look at the individual scenario they're caught in terms of the event, weigh the pros and cons, and make the decision as to whether or not, in fact, they are going to pay the ransom, or if, in fact, they're just going to rebuild their systems. But the only thing I would really emphasize, and really is important, is we've got to recognize that these are crimes, and that municipalities need to report these crimes either to the OPP, their local enforcement, or the RCMP, because even though it's hard to track these criminals down, there still needs to be some tracking of it in some way in terms of police activity and monitoring.
Sumit, let me get your view on that, on what transpired in Atlanta, because I guess it takes a lot of political guts to say to taxpayers, we're going to spend $17 million to avoid giving $55,000 to a bunch of cyber terrorists. What do you think of their decision?
I think, again, Steve, I think the decision is going to lie based on their priorities and the current state of their infrastructure. I think, we know that resources are not equivalent across all municipalities. I can speak for Canada, at least between large cities, smaller municipalities, we can see that differential existing, which means that they haven't built the infrastructure and the backup system and the resources to bring their systems back online and rebuild them. In this particular case, Atlanta made a choice. I think they probably determined that choice was the right one for them. Maybe not financially, but from the perspective of setting some baselines around how they're going to approach these situations, I think it was probably a wise decision.
Mayor Matheson, did you consider that decision, saying to hell with them and we're going to just build a new system?
Well, as I said, when you sit with your cyber insurers, they immediately send in expert help. In this case, it was Deloitte. They make the decision with you. Now, of course, council at the end of the day could have said, no, we're gonna hold up and not pay. But then you sit there, you've paid for cyber insurance. The insurer will then say to you, we're not covering X, Y, and Z. You can now pay for it out of the municipal taxation base, which is already pushed to the limit on many, many aspects of providing service. And why did you get the insurance in the first place? So we went along with the advice of our insurer to ensure that we stayed in compliance with our policy and to ensure that our taxpayers had the coverage that we had originally paid for.
Do you yet know who did this? I mean, I know you've got a contact that you had to send the Bitcoin to, but does anybody actually know who was responsible for it?
As I understand it, the RCMP and the OPP are quite well aware of the actors involved. An expression they used, and it's quite funny. They said, we know these guys, they're good criminals, but they said they'll deliver if you pay the ransom, and we think you should do it. The other piece about this is it's not that we interact with the ransom holder or our IT staff does. The outside consultant at Deloitte that was brought in by our insurer, Deloitte, they actually were the ones that interacted with them, and they have somebody who specializes in the dark web and in dealing with these individuals. So they have some kind of rapport between them, if you can believe it, at their level, because they're like the roadrunner and the coyote. They meet up regularly to talk about these things.
That's a nice analogy. Tell me, did you, I'm not trying to suggest here that you're antediluvian or something like that, but let's face it, most people in this country don't know where to buy Bitcoin. Did you know where to buy Bitcoin to take care of these guys?
Not at all. What had actually happened was when it came time to buy the Bitcoin, that's where the consultant comes in. They know exactly where to buy it. They know how they're going to buy it. They know how they're going to transact on the dark web. They know the sequence of events that have to happen to do so. And it's not as simple as they said on the Sunday they want the money and on Monday you're giving it. It takes days to set up. There's a whole process to make sure that the first amount of coin goes in, that the encryption keys are given. They're then put on the server to make sure what they said they were going to do does occur. And then there's a transaction that takes place for the next bit, another set of encryption keys. And there's a whole process that was put in place, which I guess is negotiated between the consultants, security consultants that are hired by municipalities, businesses, and of course their insurers, and of course the people on the other side, the terrorists/criminals.
Submit the example of Atlanta, $17 million, that's a lot of money. The Stratford example, $55,000 of Bitcoin, is a lot less money. I'd like to know, from your experience, what's the most egregious amount you can recall having been paid, let's say in Canada, to get rid of a cyber threat?
You got me there, Steve. I think, in Canada, the numbers have been relatively low. On a North American level, I've heard numbers up to about $2.5 million, but I wouldn't be able to give you an exact answer for Canadian landscape. But I think what we've seen typically is $50,000 to about $500,000 seems to be an average within which a lot of these organizations are operating when they make their requests.
And do you know, I mean, fair enough on the money amount, but do you know what the sort of most egregious or worst example of an attempted threat was?
Yeah, I think, one of the threats that comes to mind is one that had happened in New Brunswick. In fact, I think St. John's in New Brunswick, and they were forced to shut down all municipal services following a severe breach. Now, we've heard lots of these things, but in this particular case, St. John, I believe, had refused to pay the ransom demands and also elected not to immediately reveal the details of that attack and went ahead and completely rebuilt its systems, which means that you had to change everything from how you communicate with the outside world to how you deliver services. That's a massive undertaking, and that's one that comes to mind right now as you ask that.
And how did that eventually resolve itself?
I believe they did manage to get through. Now it takes there's a lot of interesting learnings as we go through this experience, right from how do we communicate with our partners, to communicating with our vendors, to communicating with citizens. And at the same time, how do we start to now integrate our systems to work with much larger networks that we are part of? So I think part of this is the learning that comes and follows months, years after, and then how that learning is shared with a much larger ecosystem so that we can all benefit from it.
Judy, I guess one of the concerns is that nowadays, pretty much everything we rely on our municipalities for is digital, whether it's electricity or water service or whatever. So tell me, what is the concern you have that if these things don't get resolved appropriately, if a threat is acted upon, what are you concerned would take place?
Well, as you know, Steve, municipalities are responsible for a lot of services that their citizens rely on, from road networks through to water systems, wastewater systems. And many of these monitoring systems are now connected to the internet and subject to potential threats as a result. And, if there is an example potentially of a cyber attack, it could threaten the water quality that you have. It could threaten a number of things in terms of that. And we've seen that in the US. There was a water system that was attacked, and it did threaten the water quality, which in turn obviously could also threaten the public health. And so these are the kinds of things that really concern me about this. And this is where we really want to focus our energy in terms of municipalities thinking about their IT infrastructure, because it's not just your computer system anymore. It's anything now that a service provides that is connected to the internet. We've got to think broadly, and we've got to think about how we are going to maintain current software standards for those, how we're going to protect against criminal activity within those systems. And also, we're going to need to develop business continuity plans in the event of attacks. And those are the kinds of things that we are working on right now with municipalities.
Zachary, could you pick up on that? What would be your most scariest concern of happening to a municipality if some cyber threats were actually acted upon?
So for me, it's really about the threat to critical infrastructure. So I share a lot of the same concerns as Judy, and she mentioned the case in Florida. That was Oldsmere, Florida, where the cyber criminals actually slowly increased the amount of sodium hydroxide within the water supply, right, to the point where it was really reaching dangerous levels. So it's things like that really scare me. But with that said, even kind of run-of-the-mill cyber attack could critically disrupt the operations of any municipal government and prevent them from servicing residents over the period of 2 weeks or months or anything like that. So these can be incredibly disruptive. But I think the severe threat to critical infrastructure is the thing that really worries me.
Let me follow up with you on that, Zachary, because just as we try to imagine what potential havoc can be caused, I mean, presumably they could knock out all the street lights. I mean, the traffic signals. I mean, that would really cause a lot of havoc. Or presumably you could also erase the tax rolls in the city, and you wouldn't know who'd paid their taxes and who hadn't. Are those the kinds of things that municipalities worry about?
Absolutely. And I mean, more and more infrastructure at the local level has digital components to it. I mean, we have sensors in our roads, our traffic lights are generally controlled digitally. I mean, you could knock out every single traffic light. You could raise bridges and not put them back down. You could erase tax records. You could release sensitive payment information from people who were paying for recreation programs or anything like that. I mean, the thing is that the majority of services that Canadians receive are coming from local governments. And so we think about everything that we use on a day-to-day basis that is delivered locally not being available, right? Water potentially, right? I mean, we're talking about really disruptive changes that could be happening.
Your Worship, that's a pretty scary list that Zachary just gave, but what was on your list when you knew that Stratford had been hit?
Well, you right away go through all the privacy legislation and all the data that sits on your server, whether it is banking information, how the recreation programs, your Ontario Works database, your public housing database, all those types of listings. We're required to, of course, separate them and ensure that they're protected at all times. And that was one of the first things we wanted to do, is make sure that any data that we were holding like that was protected and safe, because that was one of the things we communicated, not only to our staff, but the public, that the information did not include personal or private information. And that gave some relief to people. There's still the skepticism that goes with it, where they're kind of the show me I'm from Missouri state idea, where they want to know, how do you know that for sure? And you just have to keep following up on it. You know, one of the things that strikes me the most about this, though, is that every municipality is being tasked to do more with less, to become more efficient in providing services. And everybody wants to move to that online ability to transact, to buy service, to do things. And with it comes, of course, an increased amount of traffic on the internet, and of course, through systems that are prevalent throughout municipal government. But it also then requires that there's the commensurate amount of money spent on security. So the efficiency that's gained, that people think you gain from necessarily moving to online services, it actually takes some of those savings, and they have to be diverted into better IT systems and higher security levels to ensure that you can continue to operate those services. And I think that's one of the things that so many municipalities are learning now, that the savings just don't fall to the bottom line, don't allow you to reduce taxes, don't allow you to allocate to some other area, because the IT infrastructure now needs to be seen as foundational to the operation of the entire community. If you don't have strong IT and strong IT services and security, you can't provide the basic services anymore.
Well, I was just going to say, Judy, we're not going to go back to the day where everybody trudges down to City Hall with a check and pays their water bill in person. I mean, most municipalities couldn't handle that if that were to happen. So the alternative is to try to be as invulnerable as possible to any cyber mischief. How close to that do you think municipalities across Ontario are?
So the pandemic has really hastened the pace of digital government. Citizens are absolutely asking for more access to digital services, and that is something that municipalities need to respond to. But the mayor is absolutely right. This is something that is relatively new. IT infrastructure is now just as critical as your road network or your water system, and there's some work that needs to be done by municipalities in terms of strengthening that IT infrastructure to be able to provide those services. In terms of protecting, there's no guarantee that anything you can do was going to give you 100% protection. Criminals are very motivated to access your systems. And so the point I made earlier about training the humans is really important, because that is in fact the weakest link. It's really, we need to focus on training people to recognize potential phishing attacks through email so that they don't open up the system to vulnerability. You can do all kinds of things in terms of encryption of data, multi-factor authentication, backups that are held off-site, all of those good best practices in terms of IT. But we really do need to focus on the humans and training them how to protect themselves personally from cybercrime, because once you train them how to do it personally, they're going to bring it to work as well.
Sumit, let me get your take on this. I guess it is the case that every time a municipality thinks that it has closed one door in terms of protecting itself, the criminals have figured out how to open another door. I guess who's winning the race is what I really want to know.
We've heard this before, Steve. They just need to win once. We need to win every single time. So in that sense, the race is a much longer race for us, where we're sprinting and marathoning all at the same time. And that's just, unfortunately, the way our municipalities are currently resourced. Municipalities are often dealing with maintaining cyber risk and resilience for some of the most important civic services and critical infrastructure that keep our communities operational and safe. That's a pretty large attack surface for a lot of cyber criminals to try and exploit. And they recognize the vulnerability of this sector, and they're looking to exploit them both for monetary gains and socio-political instability, and sometimes sheer mischief. So the game looks very different from their perspective than ours. And at this point, we've got quite a road ahead of us.
In which case, Zachary, is this a case of not whether a municipality is going to be hit, but when a municipality is going to be hit?
It's in a way it is, and I think that that municipalities need to plan for this in a much more deliberate way than they have in the past. Is that municipalities have sort of tended to look at failures in certain infrastructure as a given, right? That we know that we're going to see potholes every single spring. It's going to happen, right? So planning for potholes is something that municipalities do, right? A cyber attack is something that may happen. The potholes are guaranteed. So it requires a bit of a change in mentality, I think.
You've obviously been driving on Eglinton Avenue just north of our studio when you talk about potholes, because, oh my goodness, there are body shops all over the city that are getting rich off drivers who are going past there. Anyway, that's off the path. Let me get back on the path here. Mayor Matheson, before the cyber attack hit Stratford, how big was your IT department?
Our IT department was 6 individuals. We've since grown it from there. We've increased the amount of spend we have on IT security. We have made it more foundational to what we do. But there is an opportunity here for the senior levels of government to play a role in this. As you've alluded to, there's 444 municipalities in this province. Over 300 of them are small in nature, townships and small rural municipalities. There is a role for the government to play in helping create a provincial standard or a national standard with regard to cybersecurity and sharing some of those systems. We need to make sure that the disparate parts of the municipal sector come together under one umbrella. You look in small municipalities, sometimes the person in charge of IT infrastructure is also the person that collects the tax money and works the counter on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoon. And somehow we need to make sure that we give those smaller municipalities just as much support as we would look to in the large urban centers. And I think there's an opportunity for us to collectively buy together, create standards to share information. They're already doing it at Ryerson on the cyber security unit, sharing risks and best practices. They're doing it at AMO. And I think that these things can continue to go on into a provincial level and almost a national level here, so that Canada can be a secure nation for its municipalities and government IT infrastructure.
Judy, I should get you to follow up on that, because I have no doubt that cities like Toronto and Ottawa spend tens of millions a year to keep their systems safe, but there are lots of small municipalities, as the mayor says, where they can't afford that. What do they do?
And he's absolutely right. He stole one of my standard lines that I use every time I introduce municipalities in Ontario. There's 270 with less than 10,000 population. Their average FTE count is 5. They've got small staff counts dealing with multiple services requirements they already have. And IT is not one of them necessarily. And in those cases, they often rely on either an external consultant to manage their IT infrastructure, or they work within a shared services model. There are some counties within Southern Ontario that offer IT to their area municipalities, for example. So these are the kinds of things that municipalities are doing to beef up their IT infrastructure, because they just don't have the staff to do it locally. We are also working on helping them build that. Part of my job actually is to identify gaps in markets for municipalities and ways to extend the capacity of municipalities, and also perhaps do some aggregation to lower the cost or provide better value. And so we're absolutely looking at that at AMO in terms of ways that we can help municipalities on the cyber side. It's also around cyber insurance. The mayor spoke extensively about how they relied on their insurance provider when they were attacked. The reality is that cyber insurance is quickly becoming a dinosaur. It's a losing proposition for insurance companies. They are not offering insurance for cyber anymore to a lot of places. If you get it, feel grateful for it, but I suspect that within the next couple of years, it'll be completely gone. And that's an area that we're looking at, because gone with that cyber insurance is that cyber response team that the mayor and his council relied on when they were attacked. Small municipalities don't have those cyber response teams on their own. And so we need to figure out how to provide that kind of service in the event of attack.
That feels like a good place to leave this thing. I want to thank the 4 of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your views on this. Zachary Spicer from York University, Dan Matheson, the mayor of Stratford. In the lower left-hand column, Sumit Bhatia from the Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst System, and Judy Dizelle from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, all 444 of them. Talk about a target. All right, thanks everybody. Be well out there.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.